Good evening. Tonight is a video for brand new players, and it's going to be how to play the game. We're going to go over everything you need to know, how to set up a game, what all the stats are on these cards, and what the different steps are for playing around. We're going to assume that if you're watching, you have a revised core set, which is the most likely reason that you seek out a video on how to play Lord of the Rings LCG, or perhaps you're interested in getting it. This is a deck built using the revised core set. So typically when you're starting, you won't have everything set up for you the way this program does. You'll be setting it up on a table, and the first step is to set up your deck. You can, to start, use one of the pre-made decks that is listed in the instruction manual, or use one of the 4 monosphere decks, which is what I did the first time I played Lord of the Rings LCG. I just played Against Passage Through Mirkwood. The first quest, I played the leadership deck, the spirit deck, the tactics deck, and the lore deck without making any changes to them. And that's a good way to play. To demonstrate the game, I'm using a deck that I built using different spheres, but to start, I just used the monosphere decks that came in the box. So you set up your own deck first. You'll note that in the top left corner there's a number. For Theodred it's 8, for Eowyn it's 9, for Aragorn it's 12. That is the threat of each hero, or the cost of each hero. You add up the 3 numbers and adjust your threat dial to match the total of the 3 numbers. In this case 29, but if you're playing with the actual physical game, you'll have a threat dial that you set to 29. And you may wonder, is that a high number? Is that a low number? Well, in the second quest, it kind of punishes you for being over threat 30. You lose at threat 50, but under threat 30 is a good goal for the second quest in the game, because there is an enemy in the staging area to start the quest who will attack you immediately. Not attack you, he'll engage with you on round 1 if you're over 30, and using the core set alone, that's a tough challenge to handle. So whatever your combination of heroes, if you're aiming to beat at least the first 2 quests and hopefully the third, you generally want to be under 30 is a good goal. Once you've got the deck set up, you take the stage 1A of whatever quest you're playing and read the setup instructions. You'll have the encounter deck set up according to the symbols on the card. You can see there on the right part of the screen where it says flies and spiders, above the text just to the right there's a symbol of a tree, a symbol that looks like a skull, and a symbol that looks like a spider. To set up your encounter deck, you want to use all of the cards that came in the core set, the enemy cards that have the spider symbol, the skull symbol, and the tree symbol, and those will form your encounter deck. Some of the cards that you get in the core set will be used in multiple quests. Some of them won't. Some of them are specific to a quest. You shuffle those together, and then you read the setup instructions on quest 1A. For this one, it is search the encounter deck for 1 copy of Forest Spider, which we have here, and 1 copy of the Old Forest Road, which we have here, and add them to the staging area. The staging area will be this area, but you can make it any area on the table really, as long as it's convenient to remember. The most convenient way, I would think, to think of the staging area is it's cards that are on deck. These are not active objectives or cards that are actively attacking you or can be attacked by you yet, but they're going to be shortly, usually. The threat on the enemy card of 25, if your threat on your heroes is higher or equal to the threat on the enemy card, it means it's imminently going to be engaged with you and attacking you. One reason why lower threat is better. Lower threat gives you options. Lower threat also means less stats on your heroes. You may note that Theodred's threat is 8. His stats add up to 8. 1 plus 2 plus 1 plus 4 is 8. Eowyn's threat is 9. Her stats are 4, 1, 1, 3. That adds up to 9. Aragorn's is 12. 2, 3, 2, 5 adds up to 12. Generally speaking, the threat of the hero will be more or less equivalent to their stats. So higher stats means greater challenge. Lower stats means less challenge. Should make sense. Once you've got the setup completed, you flip 1A to the other side. And in this case, there is no further instructions to complete. There's only flavor text or lore. And you'll note that the card says 8 just above and to the left of the flavor text, and that is the amount of progress you need to make on it to proceed to the next phase of the quest. In this program, there is a handy resource here to the left telling you all the steps of playing the round. Once you have your deck set up and the encounter deck set up, you're ready to get started. And the first step is going to be gain resources and draw cards. You get, if there are no buffs to your heroes, you get 1 resource per hero. And you get to draw 1 card. That's the base amount of resources that you get every round at the beginning of the round when it says resource phase, gain resources and draw cards. You get 1 resource per hero, and you get to draw 1 card. That's it for that phase. Planning phase is when you can play your cards. The card cost is in the top left corner, the big number. You can play cards using resources that match the sphere of the hero. So leadership heroes can pay for leadership cards. I have 2 leadership resources between my 2 heroes. If I had any 2-cost leadership cards, which I do, I can play them. If I had any 1-cost spirit cards, that's the blue sphere, I could play them as I have 1 resource on a spirit hero. I do have 1 card I could play for 2 resources in my leadership sphere. 2 cards, but this card is an event, a response. It happens in response to something else. Attachments or allies are typically what you're going to play during the planning phase, and I have an attachment I can play for 2 leadership resources. I will play it on Aragorn at a cost of 2, and this attachment says exhaust Steward of Gondor to add 2 resources to attached hero's resource pool. Exhaust simply means that you use the card's 1 action per round. Typically each hero, each ally, each attachment, some attachments are passive, but in this case this card says exhaust Steward of Gondor to add 2 resources to attached hero's resource pool. Exhaust simply means you've used its 1 action for a round. So I turn it sideways to denote that I have used its action, and then I carry out the action, which is add 2 resources to the attached hero's resource pool. So this is a net no effect because I used 2 leadership resources and I have 2 leadership resources. However, this can be used every round and it doesn't have to be paid for every round. Attachments remain on a hero unless something instructs you to discard them. So, Steward of Gondor remains, even after all expansions and adventure packs have been released, it remains one of the best cards in the game. It is included in almost every deck that is built because it is the best resource generation in the game. It provides 2 resources every round, and no other card can match that in terms of resource generation. If you've played other card games before, or if this is the first card game you've ever played, resource generation is always very important and required to really get your deck rolling. That's all the cards I have that can be played. All of the other cards cost too much to be played right now, except for the response cards, which only happen in response to something else. They only get played in response to something else. So that will be all for the planning phase. Now the questing phase. Questing questing and combat are where we decide how we're going to use the actions of the characters that we have. They have one action per round, and each of them will generally excel at something different. The questing phase, the one we're in now, the relevant stat is willpower. That is the top stat of the three smaller numbers. 2, 3, 2. The top one is 2. That is Aragorn's willpower. That is the amount that he will contribute to the quest if I should choose to use his action on questing. Eowyn's willpower is 4. That is exceptional. She is a very, very good quester and not particularly good at attacking or defending. She will almost always be used as a quester. Theodred's is 1. Not very good at all. However, after he commits to a quest, you can choose another hero committed to the quest to add 1 resource. That is quite good. Resource generation is hard to come by. So Theodred in that way makes up for his limited willpower by generating resources. That is one of the primary reasons to include him in a deck. If you're wondering which of these heroes have good stats, a good benchmark would be 3 of any of the stats. Willpower, attack, or defense would be pretty good. 4 is exceptional. There are going to be very few heroes in the game that'll ever have 4 in any one of these stats. If you find one that has 4, that's an exceptional hero generally. Eowyn is an exceptional quester. She remains in use as a quester for quite a long time into the life cycle of the game. So, willpower from our heroes is what we contribute to the quest. The enemy opposes us with threat. This small number here, this location has 1 threat. The forest spider has 2 threat. Cards in the staging area contribute threat against us. If I were to commit Eowyn to the quest, I would be committing her 4 willpower using her action. I would be faced with 3 threat plus 1 card from the encounter deck, which generally speaking you can count on. I would plan for 2 or 3 threat coming from the card that we have not seen yet. So you get to plan for the questing phase based on what you know and a guess at what you don't know. And I would guess that in order to make any progress on this quest, we need at least 2 willpower to count for the forest spider, 1 willpower to account for the forest road, and then another 2 or 3 willpower to account for the card that we don't know yet. Total, that would be 5, maybe 6. So we would probably need 7 willpower in our favor in order to make any progress on the quest. And progress on the quest is how we advance to the next phase, and the phase after that, and finally a victory. So willpower and questing is very important. But if we commit all of our characters to the quest, we will have no one available to attack or defend. And we do have an enemy on the table and could potentially have another enemy on the table. So we need to balance how much we're willing to risk in willpower against how much we think we'll need to defend against the enemies or attack the enemies. So in this case, I'm going to commit Eowyn to the quest. I'm going to commit Theodred to the quest. I'm going to commit Aragorn to the quest. Because Aragorn has this text, after he commits to a quest, spend 1 resource from his resource pool to ready him. Readying a hero simply means you give him his action back. He's no longer sideways, he's ready to go, he can attack or defend now. He cannot commit to the quest again. He remains committed to the quest. You can commit each character to the quest only once. He cannot commit to the quest again, but he is contributing his willpower. As Theodred gives a resource, 1 resource, to a hero who is committed to the quest, I will choose to give that resource because I have some high-cost spirit cards in my hand. I will give the resource to Eowyn. So I have 6, 7 willpower in my favor. I'm currently facing 3 willpower. That ends the commit characters to the quest phase of the game. Then we have the staging step. Staging is simply when you reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. And that card is a treachery. It has a when revealed effect. That simply means when a card is revealed from the deck, do this. Each player discards all event cards in his hand. Well, I have 2 event cards in my hand. They may both be discarded, or I can use my response card, cancel the when revealed effect of a card that was just revealed from the encounter deck. I will do that rather than discard 2 cards. Once I've played a card, it goes to my discard pile. This cancels the Eyes of the Forest Treachery, and it goes to the encounter deck discard pile as it has been played. That is the one encounter deck, the one encounter card from the deck. Now, I add up my willpower, which is 7, compare it to the enemy's threat, which is 3, and I have a difference of 4, so I make 4 progress on the quest. That is the end of the quest phase. Now the travel phase. In the travel phase, I have the option of taking one location out of the staging area and making it the active location. The active location simply means that it doesn't contribute its threat against me anymore when I'm questing. Now there's only 2 threat against me. However, when I make progress on the quest, any progress that I make would first go to clear this location or explore this location. You can see the number 3. That is the number of progress it takes. If I were questing right now with my 7 willpower against 2 threat, I would make 5 progress. 3 would need to go here on the location, at which point I would discard the location, and then 2 could go on the quest. This card has a response. After you travel to Old Forest Road, which means you take it out of staging and make it active, you may choose and ready one character, and if you remember, ready means I give that character his action back. So I may choose and ready Theodred, because he has 2 attack. Attacking and defending are what is left to come in this round. So willpower isn't very important, or I would ready Eowyn. That's all for the travel phase. It's not very common for a location to have a beneficial effect for the player. This location does because it's the first quest in the game, but typically the travel effect is something harmful and is what's called a travel cost that the player has to pay in order to travel to the location, and this prevents various challenges for the player. Now we move on to the encounter phase. First we have what's called optional engagement. If we have any enemies in the staging area that have higher threat than our threat, we have 29. If we had an enemy that had 30 threat, we would not be forced to engage it in that round, but we could still choose to if we wished. And the reason you might choose to is because once the enemy is out of staging, they no longer contribute any threat against you during questing, and therefore your willpower, if there are no enemies here, will go straight to the quest or to the location and then to the quest. Whereas if you leave the enemy in staging area, if you have the choice, the enemy will continue to contribute its threat against you and will slow your progress on the quest. In this case, there is nothing to optionally engage. We could still choose to optionally engage this enemy during the phase if there was some benefit, and sometimes there is. But in any case, we're going to be engaging this enemy this phase because our threat is higher than the enemy's threat. Think of threat as something like how much noise you're making. You have a well-armed party with a lot of power. They attract a lot of attention, and therefore a lot of enemies engage them. Engagement checks is when you check to see if any enemies have threat lower than your threat. In this case, this enemy does, and so this enemy is going to engage the player. And it has a forced effect, which means it takes effect immediately. And that forced effect is after Forest Spider engages a player, it gets +1 attack until the end of the round. We went over threat. We went over willpower. The next 2 stats are exactly what their pictures look like, attack and defense, and the red number is health points. This enemy has engaged with us, the player. Therefore, it gets +1 attack until the end of the round. It only gets that effect on the round that engages us. If it were to survive this round, it would not get the +1 attack in future rounds. That ends the encounter phase. Now we move on to combat. First step in the combat phase is to deal 1 shadow card to each enemy. A shadow card is simply a card face down from the encounter deck underneath the enemy. Once the shadow cards are dealt, and the shadow card will have a random effect. It could do nothing. It could add something to the enemy's attack. In this case, you can see at the bottom of the card it says Shadow. Defending player must choose and discard 1 attachment he controls. So if this Forest Spider were the face down card, you ignore the shadow effect right now of this card. But if the card underneath it had a shadow effect that said that, we would have to exhaust a character. You'll note some cards do not have a shadow effect. If they are dealt as a shadow card, they do nothing, and that is great. We have dealt shadow cards. Enemy attacks. The first step of enemy attacks is for us, the player, to declare a defender. We can see that this enemy will be attacking for 2 attack. +1 attack is 3 attack, plus whatever the shadow card says. We have Aragorn as an option to defend. He is ready. He has his action available. He has 2 shields. Therefore, he would take 1 damage from the Forest Spider, plus whatever the shadow card says. We have Theodred available. He has 1 shields. Therefore, he would take 2 damage from the Forest Spider, plus whatever the shadow card says. It seems like we would want to choose Aragorn as the defender because he can take more of a hit and he has more HP than Theodred. However, Aragorn also attacks for more. So if we want to remove the spider quicker, we could have Theodred defend and Aragorn attack, and that would deal 2 damage to the spider, who has 1 shield. Aragorn's 3 attack against 1 shield would deal 2 damage, which would take 2 turns to kill the Forest Spider, whereas Theodred would take 4 turns to kill the Forest Spider. So we're going to choose Theodred as the defender, which uses his action for the round. After we've chosen the defender, we check and see what the shadow card does. And in this case, there is no shadow effect listed at the bottom of the card, so it does nothing. And the card goes to the encounter deck discard pile. We now have 2 cards there. The resolution of the attack is therefore 3 attack to 1 shield is 2 damage. Now Theodred can only take 4. If he has 4 wounds equal to his 4 HP, he dies. And therefore he can't take a lot of attacks. He's not a very strong defender. Next step is player attacks. I will declare Aragorn as an attacker. Using his 1 action for the round, I will compare his 3 attack to the Forest Spider's 1 shield. A difference of 2. 2 damage is dealt to the Forest Spider. That ends the combat phase. And we have the refresh phase. In the refresh phase, all cards get their actions back. We raise threat by 1. Remember, if we get to 50 threat, we lose the game. If you're in a multiplayer game, you pass the player 1 token to the next player. And then we end the refresh phase. And we begin a new round, round 2. And we're on to the next round. In this case, it was automated by the game. And it raised the threat for me. But typically you would, once again, enter the resource phase, gain 1 resource per champion, and draw one additional card, which was done for me by the program. That begins phase 2, or round 2. And now we can decide what we want to play. In addition, we have an action. Action windows will be listed in the instruction manual. In this program, you'll note it says gain resources and draw cards, then player actions. This is the point where you can use any card that says action, not response. If it says action, you can use the card in any action window, and they are noted in this program. Then player actions, etc. So we will use this card's action to gain 2 additional resources, which will enable us to play one of these 4-cost cards. I could also play Wandering Took with Eowyn's 2 spirit resources, but I will choose not to, as I would like to save up for the 4-cost spirit card. So I will play this leadership card, which costs 4 resources. The 4 leadership resources can come from any combination of your leadership heroes, but not your spirit hero. Once I've finished playing all the cards I wish to play, which I have because there are no more cards I can play, we move on once again to the quest phase, where I decide which characters I would like to commit to the quest. I am always going to commit Eowyn with her 4 willpower. She has almost no combat ability. You'll notice Theodred took 2 damage with 1 shield. Eowyn could be used to take 1 attack potentially. However, if the Forest Spider had gotten a +1 attack buff, which is not uncommon from a shadow card, Eowyn would have died. It is not desirable to use her as an attacker or defender. She will be used as a quester almost every round. Once again, we will commit Theodred and Aragorn and spend Aragorn's resource to give him his action back thanks to his response text. So we have 7, willpower 4. The Longbeard Orc Slayer will not be committed to the quest as he contributes 0 willpower, therefore there is no point. He has a response of being able to deal 1 damage to each orc enemy in play. However, there are no orc enemies in play, so that does nothing. This is a creature and a spider, which is listed just below the title of the card. So we have committed our heroes to the quest. We move on to staging, which means we reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. That card is a King Spider with 2 threat against. Our 7 willpower compared to 2 threat is 5, so we make 5 progress. 3 must go on the location. We don't have a choice about that. You must put progress on the active location first. 3 means we have explored the Old Forest Road, and it goes to the discard pile. And an additional 2 go to the main quest. It requires 2 more to progress to phase 2. That would be the quest resolution stage. Now we're on to the travel stage. There are no travel actions to be taken as there are no locations on the table. So we move on to the encounter phase. Whether optionally or forced, this enemy will be engaged as its 20 threat is lower than our 30 threat. This card also had a When Revealed effect. The When Revealed effect should take place during the staging step as soon as the card is revealed from the deck. Each player must choose and exhaust 1 character he controls. I have 2 characters available that can be exhausted. Exhaust means to use their 1 action for the round. I will choose to exhaust the weaker of the 2 enemies, the 2 allies, Longbeard Orc Slayer. Then we move on to quest resolution, where I clear the location and make my 2 progress. And then we move on to travel, which we skip as there are no locations on the table, and encounter phase. This enemy will engage as his threat is lower than the player threat. No more engagement as there's no more enemies in staging area. So we move on to combat. The the first step of the combat phase, deal shadow cards. 1 shadow card per enemy, face down from the top of the encounter deck to the enemy. And we move on to enemy attacks. Enemies attack in order of highest threat to lowest. Forest Spider has 25 threat. King Spider has 20. Forest Spider goes first. I must declare an attacker. In this case, I have a 2 attack enemy and a 3 attack enemy attacking, and I only have 1 action available, therefore only 1 hero to defend. If you do not have anyone available to defend an attack, you take an undefended attack, which means all the damage must go on one of your heroes, ignoring shields. As one of these enemies must be undefended, I will choose to take the lower attack value attack as undefended. I will reveal the shadow card. This shadow effect, choose and discard 1 attachment from the defending character. If this attack is undefended, discard all attachments you control. That's all for Steward of Gondor. I'm sad to see it go. It's a very good attachment. The shadow card goes to the discard pile. Steward of Gondor goes to my discard pile. 2 attack value must now be assigned 2 damage to one of my heroes. I will assign that damage to Eowyn. It's a little dangerous. She only has 1 hit point left. There are some effects which could deal 1 hit point of damage to a hero. But I'm trying to keep Aragorn as healthy as possible because he's being used as a defender and will likely be used as a defender again, perhaps the primary defender as the highest defense value character. Second attack, King Spider will attack Aragorn. He's declared as the defender. The shadow card says raise defending player's threat by 4, 8 if it's undefended. 1, 2, 3, 4 threat. Gets us 4 threat closer to losing the game at 50 threat. Then we compare this enemy's attack of 3 to Aragorn's shields of 2, and we take 1 damage. Player attacks. There are no player attacks possible as none of the allies or heroes on the table have an action remaining. So we must move on to the refresh phase, where we ready our cards, raise threat by 1, pass the first player token if in a multiplayer game, and we end the round. In the refresh phase, we gain 1 resource per hero and draw 1 card. I believe in the last round I forgot to use Theodred's ability. After Theodred commits to a quest, choose a hero, add 1 resource to that hero's pool. Lots of little mistakes like that will happen in almost every game. It's very difficult to play a perfect game. But it's possible if you're willing to put the time in with the attention to detail. In any case, as I've forgotten it, I'll be short 1 resource over what I could have had. So, Steward of Gondor, losing it hurts. I would have had resources enough to play another Longbeard Orc Slayer or a Silverlode Archer. As it is, I could play Wandering Took, and now as I have 2 enemies I'm facing, I really do need the additional ally right away. My plan was to wait for Northern Tracker, but now I feel I need this ally right away, so I will play it during the planning phase. The action is not useful in a solo game. It does nothing. Reduce your threat by 3 to give control of Wandering Took to another player. Raise that player's threat by 3 once per round. In a solo game, this does nothing. Now in the quest phase, I can choose characters to commit to the quest. As I'm facing 2 enemies, and with the potential for a third, I will quest with only 1 hero. I have no cards facing me in staging, therefore I don't have to worry about a lot of willpower against. I can count on 2 or maybe 3 coming from the encounter deck. I will still make progress with Eowyn's 4. If you make overflow progress more than you need on a quest, it does not transfer to the new card. It will simply go to waste. Therefore, it's not real advisable to spend all of my card's actions on questing. Since the extra value will simply go to waste anyway, I can save them for attack or defense. So I will only quest with Eowyn for 4. We'll move on to staging, which means revealing a card from the encounter deck. It has no when revealed effect. It does have 2 threat against. So I make 2 progress because my 4 willpower minus the 2 threat is 2 progress. And that will move us on to phase 2. Phase 1 is defeated. Phase 2 has no setup text, only lore. Therefore it's flipped to the other side. And on this side, it requires 2 progress to defeat. When you defeat this stage, proceed to one of the 2 a chosen path stages at random. Phase 3 has 2 options. You choose one at random when you defeat phase 2. In the travel phase, I may choose to travel to the Great Forest Web. If I do, I must exhaust 1 hero I control. Now I don't really want to do that because I'm facing 2 enemies against me right now and I need to deal with them. If I got another enemy, I'd be in danger of being overwhelmed. Therefore, I will choose not to travel to Great Forest Web and I will simply leave it in the staging area. It will contribute its threat against me in future rounds, but will not have any other effects at the moment. Therefore, it's not a high priority. We skip the encounter phase as there are no enemies in the staging area, and we move on to combat. Each enemy gets a shadow card. Enemy attacks, starting with the highest threat enemy. And we will choose a defender. This enemy will attack for 2, plus a shadow card effect. I would like to save my highest attack allies and heroes to do damage to the enemies, so I will risk Wandering Took taking the attack. He can take 1 damage more than his shields. If the shadow card does anything, Wandering Took will die. But I think it's worth the risk because I will have my higher attack allies and heroes available. Wandering Took only has an attack value of 1. So he will take the attack from the Forest Spider. The shadow card does nothing. So Wandering Took will not die. 2 attack to his 1 shield is 1 damage. Now I have an attack from a Forest Spider. And I think I will take that attack on Aragorn. The shadow card does nothing. There is no shadow effect on this card. Off it goes to the discard pile. 3 attacked, 2 shields is 1 damage. And that is all the enemy attacks. Now I have the option of attacking. I would like to kill this Forest Spider. I can combine the attack of Theodred and the Longbeard Orc Slayer to do 4 attack against 1 shield, will deal 3 damage. So I declare them as attackers. 4 attack against 1 shield, 3 damage. That will destroy the King Spider card. Off to the discard pile it goes. Now I am only facing 1 enemy. More manageable. Next is the refresh phase. Once again, we will ready cards. All cards get their action back. Raise threat by 1. And we are on to a new round. In the resource phase, 1 resource per hero and draw 1 card. This is a very high cost card. So, I have two options here. During the planning phase, I can play a Longbeard Orc Slayer for 4 resources, or I can play a Silverlode Archer for 3 and save 1 resource to play the response card, Valiant Sacrifice, which reads, after an ally card leaves play, that card's controller draws 2 cards. So, if I know that Wandering Took is likely to die this round, I could save 1 resource, play Valiant Sacrifice, and be able to draw 2 cards to hand which could be used. But I don't have a lot of resources right now. So even if I draw the 2 cards, I won't be able to play them right away, most likely, because my resources are limited. So I think I will play the higher cost card, Longbeard Orc Slayer, for 4 resources, 2 from each of my leadership heroes, to pay for this leadership ally. That's all I can play in the planning phase. And we're on to the quest phase. Commit characters to the quest. I will commit Eowyn. I know I have 1 more encounter card coming. If it has threat of 2, I will not make any progress on the quest this round. If I commit Aragorn to the quest as well, I likely will make progress on the quest this round. A good rule of thumb is to try your best to clear the board of enemies before advancing between phases, because often when you advance to a new phase of a quest, the quest instructions will bring into play additional enemies. The quest will instruct you to take a card from the encounter deck and put it in the staging area. So a good rule of thumb when you're unfamiliar with a quest is not to advance between phases without clearing the board. So I think I'm just fine with not making the 2 progress this round. I'll simply quest with Eowyn. If I get 2 threat against me, I will not make any progress, but I will have a chance to clear the board before advancing between phases. So I will only commit Eowyn to the quest this round. Let's advance to staging, where I reveal 1 card from the encounter deck, and it does have 2 threat. There is 4 threat against me. If this card had 3 threat and there was 5 threat against me to my 4 willpower, the difference would go to my threat dial. I would take 1 threat. If this card had 4 threat and I was facing 6 threat to my 4 willpower, I would take 2 threat against me. In this case, 4 willpower to 4 threat, there is no result. And I can move on to the travel phase, where I can choose to move one of these locations to be the active location. One of them has a cost. I must exhaust 1 hero. The other one has a cost, reveal the top card of the encounter deck and add it to the staging area. So, do I risk bringing a new enemy into play? Do I exhaust 1 hero, use that hero's action for the round? Or do I do nothing and leave both of those locations to contribute their threat against me in future rounds? I think I will move to the Great Forest Web. I will pay the cost by exhausting Theodred. The reason for that is it's less risky than revealing another encounter card. If I move this encounter card, it could be another enemy that I'd have to deal with this round. I'd like to clear the board of enemies so I can move on to phase 3. I'd also like to reduce some of the threat against me. And I can afford to pay the cost of exhausting Theodred because I have only 1 enemy and 4 additional allies with actions available. Moving on to the encounter phase, which we skip as there are no enemies in the staging area. Combat phase. Deal shadow cards. Declare an attacker. Declare a defender. Aragorn will defend against the Forest Spider. His shadow card does nothing once again. 2 attack to 2 shields has no result. player attacks, I need 2 damage on this enemy. That will require attack of 3, as he has 1 shields. Longbeard Orc Slayer and Wandering Took have 3 attack between the 2 of them. Against 1 shield as 2 more damage will take care of the Forest Spider. The board is now clear of enemies, but not clear of locations. We'll move on to the refresh phase. And add 1 threat. And we're on to the resource phase. 1 resource per hero. Draw 1 card. And now we decide if there's any cards we want to play during planning. Are there any cards that I can play during planning? There are not. They all cost too much. Cannot afford any of them. We'll move on to the questing phase then. Commit characters to the quest. I have 2 threat against. I would like to clear this location, which requires 2 progress. And I can likely count on another 2 threat coming from the encounter deck. So if I want to clear the location, I need to at least quest with 6 willpower. I'll choose to commit all of my heroes to the quest. Generate 1 resource with Theodred's ability after he commits to a quest. Choose a hero, add 1 resource to that hero's pool. I will use Aragorn's. So I have a choice here. If I use Aragorn's response to ready him and give him his action back, I will not have enough resources to play Longbeard Orc Slayer next round. It requires 4. I have 2 currently. I will get 2 more next round. But I cannot do that if I use Aragorn's resource right now. So I will choose not to. It's a little bit of a risk not having him available, but I'll take that risk. So I'm questing for 7. Staging step, I reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. It has no when revealed effect. It does contribute 2 threat against me, so there is 4 against to my 7 willpower. Now, Eowyn has an action. Discard 1 card from your hand to give Eowyn +1 willpower until the end of the phase. This effect may be triggered by each player once each round, so I can move. There is an action window after staging when this card is revealed, but before quest resolution. Therefore, if I want to right now, I can discard 1 card from my hand to give Eowyn 5 willpower instead of 4. This would boost me to enough willpower to clear stage 2 this round. However, I have 1 location and 1 enemy against me, so I'm in no rush to clear stage 2. I will choose not to do that. Instead, I will make 3 progress, 2 on the location first, and then 1 on the quest. The active location will be immediately discarded, and that will resolve the quest. During the travel phase, I have to decide if I want to move to Mountains of Mirkwood or not, and it is a difficult choice. It really depends on what the top card of the shadow of the encounter deck is, and I have no way of knowing. There are cards that could be relatively innocuous. There are cards that could be absolutely terrible. I already have a relatively formidable enemy facing me, and I am going to be forced to battle him as his threat is lower than my threat. So I think I will not risk adding an additional card to the staging area. And I will simply move on to the encounter phase. Whether I choose to optionally or am forced to engage this enemy, he will engage. And as there are no more cards in staging, we move on. No more enemies, we move on to combat. We deal this enemy a shadow card, and we must declare a defender. In this case, I'm going to declare the Wandering Took. I know he's going to die, but I do have Valiant Sacrifice. It will mean that I cannot play Longbeard Orc Slayer, though, next round. So I will choose not to play it. I really want the Longbeard Orc Slayer because he deals 1 damage to each Orc enemy in play. And you can see below the Dol Guldur Beastmaster title, this card says Dol Guldur and Orc. Therefore, he will take 1 damage when the Longbeard Orc Slayer enters play. So I will declare the Wandering Took as an Defender, knowing that he is going to die. The shadow card, defending player must choose and discard one attachment he controls. I control no attachments, therefore this has no effect. Dol Guldur Beastmaster gets a second shadow card because of his forced effect. When Dol Guldur Beastmaster attacks, deal it one additional shadow card, and that shadow card does nothing. 3 attack to 1 shield is 2 damage. 1 damage is sufficient to kill the Wandering Took. He goes to my discard pile. That resolves the Beastmaster's attack. My attack will be 2 Longbeard Orc Slayers attacking for 4, compared to the Beastmaster's 1 shield that does 3 damage. That resolves all possible player attacks. We're on to the refresh phase, where we ready up all of our cards and raise threat by 1. And we're on to the next round in the resource phase, where we gain 1 resource per hero and draw 1 card. We have a Snowborn Scout, which costs 1, but I would greatly prefer a 3rd Longbeard Orc Slayer for a cost of 4 leadership resources, 2 from each leadership hero. Response: after Longbeard Orc Slayer enters play, deal 1 damage to each orc enemy in play. That will deal 1 damage to the Beastmaster. And I also have 5 spirit resources on Eowyn. I can play a Northern Tracker for 4 resources. That is all I can play during planning. We'll move on to committing characters to the quest. The only character I will commit to the quest is Eowyn. Once again, I'm trying to avoid taking on threat. I can probably count on 2 off the encounter deck, which will be 4 threat against, and I will make no progress and take no threat, which will be just fine, because I would like to clear the board before moving on to phase 1. And though it seems like it's going slow in the game, I am increasing my board state each round. Despite losing Wandering Took, I have a stronger board state than I did. And my threat is still 12 away from losing, so I'm not in a huge hurry. Therefore, I will only commit Eowyn to the quest. We will move on to staging, where I reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. It is a Dol Guldur Orc, and it does have a when revealed effect. The first player chooses 1 character currently committed to a quest, deal 2 damage to that character. Remember earlier in the game when I was forced to take an undefended attack and I put the 2 damage on Eowyn, and I said at the time that was risky, but I wanted to keep Aragorn healthy for defense. This is what I meant when I said it was risky. Eowyn is the only character committed to the quest, and she is now going to take 2 damage, and I have no way to cancel that, which means she's going to die. And as she's dying, she no longer commits any willpower to the quest. So I have 0 willpower committed to the quest against 4 threat. And so I take 4 threat to my threat dial. Moving on to the travel phase, I will once again choose not to travel to the mountains of Mirkwood, as I don't wish to add an additional enemy. And in the encounter phase, whether optionally or forced, the Dol Guldur Orcs will engage me. And we move on to combat. Deal 1 shadow card to each enemy. In the case of the Beastmaster, he gets an additional shadow card. And I will declare a defender for the Beastmaster. I have Aragorn available with his 2 defense. And I have Northern Tracker available with his 2 defense. I would prefer to use Northern Tracker because he has less attack power than Aragorn and is therefore less useful as an attacker than Aragorn is, so I will use the Northern Tracker against the Beastmaster. The first shadow card does nothing. The second shadow card gives +1 attack. 4 attack to 2 defense is 2 damage. He does survive. Off go those cards to the discard pile. That resolves the Beastmaster's attack. The Dol Guldur Orcs will attack. I'm thinking about risking Theodred, which is a risk. How much attack do I need? One Orc Slayer can dispatch the Beastmaster. No, I don't need Theodred to take the attack. I'll have Aragorn take the attack. He's the least likely to take damage, and I have an extra action. I don't need all these actions for combat. Aragorn will take the attack. The Shadow card does nothing. 2 attack to 2 shields does nothing. Now it is my turn. I will declare Longbeard Orc Slayer as an attacker against the Beastmaster. He has an attack of 2 to 1 shields, does 1 damage, and that is the 5th damage on the Beastmaster, which will kill him. Now I will declare Theodred and Longbeard Orc Slayer with 2 attack each to 0 shields is 4 damage. Only 3 are required to kill the Dol Guldur orcs. So, in spite of Éowyn dying, I'm not in terrible shape here. Combat resolved. I ready my cards. Increase threat by 1. And move on to the next round. Resources, I gain only 2 now as I only have 2 heroes, and I draw 1 card. This means I will not be able to play any spirit cards from now on. I will play Snowborn Tracker for 1 resource. Response: after Snowborn Tracker enters play, choose a location, place 1 progress token on that location. So I can place 1 progress on Mountains of Mirkwood. It is possible to clear this location without ever making it active, which avoids its travel effect entirely. Therefore, cards which put progress on locations in the staging area are generally quite valuable because they help you avoid the harmful effects of traveling to that location. You might wonder why anyone would choose to play a card that has only 1 shield and 1 health. It is useful as a blocker. A 6 attack enemy could attack the Snowborn Scout. He would die, but he would save another stronger ally or hero from a similar fate. So he can be useful as cannon fodder, and he also has the additional benefit of placing 1 progress when he enters play. That's all I can play this round. So, I will decide who I want to commit to the quest. Northern Tracker has a response. After Northern Tracker commits to a quest, place 1 progress on each location in the staging area. He contributes 1 willpower only, but he does allow me to place a progress, which means if I do that again next round, I will clear Mountains of Mirkwood without needing to deal with its travel effect. So I will commit Northern Tracker, I will commit Aragorn, and I will commit Theodred, which generates 1 resource with Theodred's ability. Resources are going to be even more valuable than they were because I only have 2 heroes now. I now have 4 willpower for me and 2 threat against, but I have no more willpower available to commit. So I have no choice but to move on to staging, where I reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. And it is Necromancer's Pass, which is 3 threat against. 1, 2, 3, 4 to 5 is -1, therefore I take 1 more threat. There are no enemies. Now I can choose to travel to one of these locations. This travel effect, Necromancer's Pass, the first player must discard 2 cards from his hand at random to travel here. I will choose to do that. I am very low on willpower. I'm really forced to do this. So I must choose 2 random cards from my hand. It will be Valiant Sacrifice, goes to the discard pile. And Brock Iron Fist goes to the discard pile. That resolves the travel effect. Skip the encounter phase, there are no enemies in staging. Skip the combat phase, there are no enemies engaged. On to refresh. All cards gain their action back. Threat goes up by 1. We're on to resources of the next round. Each hero gains 1 resource and we draw 1 card. It is a spirit card. It will not be useful. I will play the 1 card that I can play, Silverlode Archer, for 3 leadership resources. That is all I can play. I will move on to committing characters to the quest. I will choose to commit Northern Tracker, which will add 1 progress to the location and staging. He does not add a progress to the active location. They are in separate categories. 3 progress on this location clears the location as an explored location. Explored meaning it has progress tokens on it equal to its quest points. And it says, after Mountains of Mirkwood leaves play as an explored location, each player may search the top 5 cards of his deck for 1 card and add it to his hand. Shuffle the rest of the cards back into their owner's decks. So I will look at the top 5 cards of my deck, and I can choose one of these cards. Now this is a useful card. It goes on a hero. It gives +2 willpower, and if attached hero is Aragorn, he also gains a spirit resource icon, which means that you can use Aragorn's resources to play spirit cards. And as I have no other available way to play spirit cards at the moment since Éowyn is dead, this could be quite useful if the game goes on for long enough. However, as I'm at 45 threat, I don't anticipate the game going on for a lot longer. And therefore, Celebrian Stone I may not be able to take advantage of. I have to spend 2 resources off of Aragorn next round to get it into play. And then I have to save up resources enough turns to actually play one of my spirit cards, and I don't have that many rounds left in the game. So I will not choose Celebrian Stone. I will choose a card that I'm likely to be able to play as quickly as possible. That would be Guard of the Citadel. Son of Arnor would take 2. Well, I could play Son of Arnor next round. But what I really need is willpower. I'm starved for willpower, and Son of Arnor has none. As per the text of the card, I shuffle the rest of the cards back into the deck. Mountains of Mirkwood is cleared. It goes to the discard pile. I will also commit... I would like to clear the location, which will clear the board completely, and therefore I would love to move on past stage 2 this round. So I will count on needing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 willpower. I'm accounting for 2 off the top of the deck. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can generate a resource with Theodred. And I will choose not to spend a resource to ready Aragorn. If I have an enemy to fight, I'll have the attack tanked by the cannon fodder and then taken down by the 3 Longbeard Orc Slayers. We'll move on to staging. The card off the encounter deck is a King Spider, which does have a when revealed effect. Each player must choose and exhaust 1 character he controls. I will choose and exhaust a... I could choose and exhaust a Snowborn Scout and have the attack defended by a Longbeard Orc Slayer, but that's risky because a shadow card buff of 1 could kill the Longbeard Orc Slayer, and I have the feeling I'm really going to need him later. So I will choose and exhaust 1 Longbeard Orc Slayer. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 willpower in my favor against 2 threat is 3 progress. 2 go on the location first, which clears it, and the remaining 1 goes on phase 2. I have 2 phase 3s to choose from. I will shuffle them, make sure they're shuffled. Off goes phase 2, and now is a randomly chosen phase 3. I do not know what it is, as they both are identical with this card back. It has no setup instructions, so I flip it over, and it says Bjorn's Path. It requires 10 progress to clear it, and it says players cannot defeat this stage while Ungoliant's Spawn is in play. Ungoliant's Spawn is a boss enemy. It is not currently in play. If players defeat this stage, they have won the game, so I need 10 questing power, 10 questing progress to win the game. Now we move on to travel. There's no locations to travel to. We move on to encounter. 20 threat against my 45 threat, whether optionally or forced, this enemy will engage. Combat, we deal him 1 shadow card. Declare a defender. It will be, as previously discussed, the cannon fodder. He is going to die, that's his job. The shadow card does nothing. 3 attack to 1 shield will kill the Snowborn Scout. He goes to my discard pile. Now it is my turn to attack. I can have both Longbeard Orc Slayers combined for 4 attack against 1 shield, deals 3 damage, and takes down the spider. On to the refresh phase. We ready cards. Raise threat by 1. I am running out of time. If I get to 50, I will lose. Resource phase. I gain 1 resource on each hero, and I draw 1 card. Gandalf is a very useful card. Very powerful. Early in the game, you will want 3 of him in every deck you build. My plan was to play Guard of the Citadel. However, Gandalf is so powerful that I think I will save my resources to play him next round, and I will count on using him to win the game next round. He has 3 options when he enters play. You can draw 3 cards, you can deal 4 damage directly to 1 enemy, or you can reduce your threat by 5, and you can tell how 2 of those options, dealing 4 damage, or reducing threat by 5, could potentially be very helpful, even game-saving at this point in the game. So that is why I'm saving my resources for Gandalf. I will not be playing any cards this round, so I will commit characters to the quest. I will commit Aragorn. Everyone with willpower I'm committing. And I will use Theodred's ability to generate 1 resource on Aragorn. Staging, I will reveal 1 card from the encounter deck. It has no when revealed effect. It contributes 2 threat against to my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I make 3 progress. This is quite a powerful enemy. He has pretty high stats. 2 threat, 3 attack, 3 shield, 6 health. That is formidable. And as I have 46 threat, he is going to engage. We skip travel as there are no locations. Encounter phase, whether optionally or forced, he will engage. Combat, we deal him 1 shadow card. And I declare an attacker. It will be a Longbeard Orc Slayer. The shadow card. Deal 1 damage to each character the defending player controls. This is a formidable shadow card. The shadow card hurts. 1 damage to Aragorn, 1 damage to Theodred, 1 to each of the Orc Slayers, 1 damage to the Northern Tracker, kills him. 1 damage to Silverlode Archer, kills him. Hummer Horns is a formidable card early in the game. Resolution for the attack, 3 attack to 1 shield is 2 defense. This would not have killed the Longbeard Orc Slayer if it wasn't for Hummer Horns, but he does die. And after Chieftain Uftak attacks, place 1 resource token on him, and he gets +2 for each resource token on him. So he gets stronger each round that he survives. My turn to attack. I have 4 attack available to me. Against his 3 shields, deals only 1 damage. On to the refresh phase. I ready my cards, and I raise threat by 1. On to the resource phase. I gain 1 resource per hero, and I draw 1 card. Now I'm going to need Gandalf. I need 7 questing points. We'll play Gandalf for 5 resources. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And I have 2 resources remaining in which I could use for Guard of the Citadel. If I commit all characters to the quest, I will have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 willpower, and I need 7 progress. That means if I get 2 threat against me, I will not end the game. If I get 1 threat against me, or 0, I will end the game. I think I will commit all my player characters to the quest. I think if I try to deal with Chieftain Ufthak, I will lose. Well, I could use Gandalf's 4 direct damage on Ufthak. I would need only 1 more damage to kill him. But that would be risky because I would have only 2 turns remaining after this one, and then I would lose the game from threat. I could lower threat by 5 with Gandalf. Commit everyone to the quest. Potentially end the game right here if I get lucky. Or try to end the game next round. I think I will do that. Let's try to end the game right here. 8 willpower in my favor. On to staging. The encounter card is, when revealed, the player with the highest threat level attaches this card to one of his heroes. I forgot to use Theodred's ability here, add 1 resource to a hero's resource pool. Attached hero does not ready during the refresh phase unless you pay 2 resources, so I'll attach this to Theodred. However, that does mean that there's no threat against me, and 8 threat in my favor, which is going to make the 7 progress needed to clear Bjorn's path and win the game. So not an easy round. We did win. I did make 2 mistakes. I forgot Theodred's resource. And I forgot the when revealed effect for a moment from one of the cards from the encounter deck, which in a game where I'm teaching new players, that's embarrassing, but it happens. Mistakes are going to happen. No reason to fret about it. Hopefully this is a good illustration of the different steps involved in playing the game, what the stats do, what a response is, what an action is, and how you generally play. The second quest of this core set is much more difficult than the first. The third is almost impossible when playing solo. It is very, very challenging. So hopefully this provides a good example of how to play the Lord of the Rings LCG. And thank you for watching.